So you'll have to excuse the background noise as per usual. It's part of the environment, it's part of the atmosphere here. I'm on a busy street, there are very loud crows and other people. It's India. Kind of been living out of a suitcase for the last year, in a bit of transition to say the least. I think I'm sometimes it feels like I'm always in transition, but I think this lends itself to what's very interesting to me right now in particular is how limitations can be liberating. And I am somebody who has a very difficult time. I always think it's a good idea, limitations, but actually setting them, imposing them, and sticking with them is always a challenge. So nothing better than when you don't have a choice because your stuff is all packed, or you are living in places that are not your home and you have to adjust your practices and or choose what your priorities are. For a long time I've wanted, it's that thing about simplicity, simplifying. You want to do it and then somehow you avoid it. There's some kind of fear or attachment to having, in my case, a bunch of different exit routes, options that I can distract myself with if I get bored or confused or don't know what to do. And I noticed that it's kind of resting in a sense of not enoughness, not a lack of basic trust that I am enough, I have enough, I do enough kind of thing. So I'm traveling right now. I'm extraordinarily jet lagged right now. And I have an extremely limited amount of materials I could bring with me. And I'm seeking for ways to have a creative discipline without waking the dragon per se of that critical voice. So anyway, the example of limitation that I'm using is just choosing black and white pigments and one color, and I'm choosing that color as like this copper. I'm working with kind of water media acrylics, and I just like the way it spreads. I like the way it interacts with the paper. And so just those three. I had chosen 2 colors before and it was like too many options. Encouraging myself to have a lot of space between when I actually interact with the mediums on the surface and when I am not, meaning usually for me, I'm either dancing, moving my body around, pacing, or sitting still in stillness, maybe with my eyes closed. Noticing that compulsion to run off and add new elements. If I just have this material, then that will make it more interesting. It's a practicing limitation, and practicing working with limitation despite a lot of fear, and where those voices coming from. And for me, a lot of it does have to do with basically feeling that I'm not enough. And that's a cliche, but as we all know, cliches begin with some kind of seed of truth in them. And it's just amazing to me how you can be blinded to your own version of these things. And so, if you have a sense of lack or a feeling of lack around yourself in any way, shape, or form, I'll just speak about my own experience. I always have this compulsion, often have this compulsion to have many, many options. And I want to have all these options seemingly, at least in part, so that I can bail out when things become uncertain or when too much space opens up. I just came across this term, integrated arts, and there's always new terms, but I like this because I really I have both a compulsion to put things in boxes and label them, and also like doing that makes me extremely neurotic, and I resist it, so it creates this incredible tension. And for me, and I think for most artists, people that pursue exploring into the imagination and allowing that voice of from beyond, from beneath, from around our conventional, mundane willpower to speak, encounter this or are familiar with this reality, is that there isn't separation between things in terms of some idea of purity. I am a painter, and so therefore I only paint, and I don't do anything but paint. I don't eat, I don't shit, I only paint. This is, my brain kind of does something like this anyway. You're not really a painter unless you blah, 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 blah. And then there's this obsession with, well, am I or am I not? Do I fit all the criteria that I'm setting up for myself? Yes, also the disease of perfectionism here. So within limitation, there's a door into depth. When you have limited things to work with, there's limited things to relate with, and that makes relationship with one or two things is much simpler than relationship with many things, obviously. And in that space, I've been finding a huge amount of discovery and creativity. Actually, it always pretty much lies within the space. And then you want the inspiration to emerge from space, as opposed to be pulled or pushed or forced out, that you have to prove something to the world. You have to make sure that you are checking all the boxes and accomplishing something and all of this. It can be very difficult to stay in the tension. For me, a lot of anxiety arises when there's open space, and that also, I'm connecting that in my experience to a deep insecurity, a basic insecurity, a lack of trust in my own ability to kind of just be, to just like sit in open space and just allow things. So it's really a personal thing then too, of exploring what is too much and what is too little, because there's just endless. There's always something to work on, right? It's like, but you have to work with the material of yourself. What are you coming up against? What are your particulars? For me, limitation might mean 5 minutes, black and white, and one color, put on some good music, and have as much time moving around and not painting as I like. So maybe just do one stroke, or spend 30 seconds interacting with the paint and the paper, and then step back. This has a lot to do with just constantly reading and checking in with the felt experience. So if you're riddled with anxiety, what actually helps you to be with that anxiety, not try to get rid of it, which of course we will do. But, for me, if I dance a little more, or sometimes I need to sit down and just have some space, whatever the antidote is kind of like the opposite of what you've been doing. So if you've been sitting there staring frozen at a blank piece of paper, maybe the antidote is like scribbling a whole lot, like making a huge effing mess and scribbling and being really physically engaged. So I'm wondering if some of these videos are gonna end up being kind of confessionals. Maybe just, we'll say, relaying my experience. And I realized, just side note, wearing my little Datura t-shirt here, my favorite online belly dance, my favorite belly dance teachers in general. I probably never would have been willing to try belly dance because I do not like pastels and I do not like frilly things. But Datura is tribal fusion style. Rachel Bryce is the name of the woman who it's her brainchild, and her style, her curation of belly dance and her developed style that that leads that organization, and it's fantastic. Belly dance is it's dance for the female body, really. It's just this way of getting into the curves and learning slowly how to articulate and isolate and express yourself, whatever your shape or size. And it's not limited to women, obviously, but it certainly is a dance that emerged from the female physique, the female form with its curves and its boobs and fat and, etc. So I highly recommend Datura online. They have a whole lot more too than just belly dance. They have yoga and everything. So that was my little advertisement.